My name is Amberly Clay, and today I will be discussing the development of strength and flexibility and why strength and flexibility are so important for everyday life. What is strength? Strength is the ability to exert force. Strength should be built for all directions of joint movement and flexibility through range of motion. Now, referring back to what strength and flexibility are, they're skills that are performed only if one has sufficient strength. Strength has been something that has been seen as something that people need for sports and for fitness, and flexibility is something that has been overlooked for a long time. Flexibility is a necessity for several activities, not just sports, but for everyday life, which we'll discuss later as well. When it does come to sports, though, it is important for coaches and mentors to understand and realize that strength and flexibility are related. And when athletes are both strong with their strength and flexible, they become the best versions of themselves because they're more well-rounded. And now, referring back to this slide where I said that muscular strength, should be built for all directions of joint movement. This will include flexion and extension. Now, again, going back to flexibility, remember, flexibility through the appropriate and full range of motion should be well understood and used to make the athlete the best version of themselves. So obviously muscular strength is important for sports performance, and it enhances sport performance. But it also will enhance the performance of everyday daily activities. And this is for the young all the way up to the elderly as well. Now, as people become older, everyday tasks start to become more difficult. And without proper strength, they're not going to be able to do the daily tasks like they once were able to do. Now, this may include things such as getting out of bed, getting in and out of the bathtub, climbing upstairs, and it's also something we should realize this is what causes the elderly to fall. We know that as we get older, I'm sure you've seen grandparents or you've seen either in movies or anything like that, where our older population has trouble with falling. Now, if there is a lack of strength, they're going to be at a higher risk of falling. So it's very important to continue the strength throughout our lives. So there's muscle mass and there's muscle strength. Now, muscle strength is related to the actual size of the muscle, but changes in strength do not always parallel the changes in the actual size of the muscle. The amount of force a muscle group exerts is dependent upon the muscle fibers that are neurologically activated. The nervous system's pattern and timing of motor units bring forth the desired movement. So for us to move, it's all related down to the pattern and timing of our nervous system. And as our muscles grow, our strength increases, but muscle mass is not the only factor in the strength. Now, talk about neurological changes. They influence muscle strength over the lifespan. So it's not just something that happens once in our lives. It continues to influence our strength throughout our entire lives. And we cannot assume that strength changes as muscle mass changes. Strength assessments. This is very important. Why is this important? Well, this gives us a basis as to where a person is starting. Now, the max force against resistance is something that is measured with strength assessments. And when the person is conducting these strength assessments, they're actually using the absolute max force that they have against resistance. So next I'm going to talk about the differences between isotonic, isokinetic, and isometric. So isotonic is going to be when the client or the participant may be using their arms or legs, such as lifting a barbell, and they're lifting this barbell with constant resistance throughout the range of motion of the joint. Now, isokinetic is going to be the constant speed of a movement through the range of motion of the joint. So isotonic is constant resistance, isokinetic is the constant speed. Now, isometric is when the client or the participant exerts force against an immovable resistance and there is no change in the muscle length. The angle of the joint of the force exerted must be recorded because when we use different joint angles, that different angle can exert different levels of force. So it's very important during these assessments that we record the exact angle and the amount of force that they use. Now, 3 common strength assessments. One, obviously, we're very well aware of is the 1 rep max. This is a common isotonic strength assessment. And then a common isometric assessment is going to be the diameter. And finally, the common function strength test is going to be things such as your chin-ups, your flexed arm hang, and rope climbing. Now we're going to move on into the developmental changes in strength. And this is going to be the strength levels that change over lifespan. First, we will start with pre-adolescence. So as children grow, so does their strength. It's going to be a steady increase and not a big jolt at once. Boys and girls will have similar strength until they're about the age of 13. And if the boys and girls are the same height, the boys will be slightly stronger than their counterpart. And also, when the peak muscle increases, then they'll peak in their strength as well. The strength can be increased for those who are prepubescent, and strength training plays a role in neuromuscular coordination improvements. So even though it's been frowned upon by the media and by people in the past, strength training is very important for our youth as well, which we'll discuss a little bit more here later. Our adolescents and young adults. Boys have strength that increase up to the age of 13, while girls will steadily increase during adolescence. And as the girls continue to increase during the adolescence, they'll finally stop when they hit a plateau. Now, women, I found this interesting, women only produce 60 to 80% of the force that men can exert. And most of the differences in men and women is the arms and shoulder strength of men compared to trunk or leg strength. Now, the cultural norms. This is a huge thing because it may play a role in the sex differences in strength. Boys, when they were put in a test group and they had 3 different visits during a strength training session, they showed little to no improvement during those 3 sessions. However, girls improved on each visit. Now, this could be because typically boys are used to or have the mentality of they go all out in strength all the time, while girls may not have been encouraged to do that all the time. And there is research that suggests that, and this research needs to be looked into a little bit more. More research needs to be done on it. But research does suggest that men and women do not have the same proportions of type 1 and type 2 fibers. And the sex differences may be attributed to muscle fiber composition. Now, after the initial growth period, muscle mass gains come from resistance training. This is why resistance training is so important. Also, during the early weeks of training, strength improvements are related to neurological factors because muscle has not increased in size yet. Strength in middle and older adults. Strength levels are maintained in our 20s and 30s and then declines after for the average adult. Now, the strength decline is gradual, and you'll see a loss in people that are reaching their 50s, and then you will see, you'll see the gradual loss for people in their 50s, and it's going to be about an 18 to 20% loss of strength. And for those who are over 65, we'll see a great loss in arm and shoulder strength. And this is going to be about 45% muscular strength loss after 65 years of age.
I have asthma. That means I can't exercise or play sports. What do you mean?
I had a video I was going to show you guys, but for some reason when I embedded it in here, it did not want to accept it. So we're just going to move on. So there are changes in fiber types, nervous system and vascular system, that leads to greater loss of strength compared to loss of muscle mass. Now during this, isometric and isotonic strength both decline. And there's also a loss of muscle mass. That this loss of muscle mass does not parallel loss of strength in older adults. Now, due to decreased activity, poor nutrition, and an increase in the likelihood of disease, these all contribute to a loss of strength that are directly associated with changes in the body. So, as we get older, we do decrease our activity. We see it all the time. There's several people in our older population that are just not as active as they once were. Poor nutrition. People just aren't cooking for themselves. They aren't eating the way they should be eating, or we've adapted to these terrible eating habits that have continued on in our older generation. And all of these together obviously can contribute to the likelihood of developing a disease as well. And all of these in combination with each other will lead to a loss of strength. Now, muscle atrophy and changes in muscle fibers, they're not distinctly type 1 or type 2. Type 2 fibers actually will shrink. So for muscle atrophy, it's important to understand that there are changes in the muscle fibers that occur during the aging process. Some older adults won't lose their strength. They won't see as much of a loss in strength as others do. And a loss of strength is greatly affected by exercise and activity levels. So if you have somebody in the older population that is staying active and they're exercising and taking care of themselves, which we're seeing more common now as well, then you're going to see that they're continuing to hold on to their strength. Now, there's 5 general phases of strength and muscle mass over our lifespan. So these 5 general phases are an early increase, steady advancement, adolescent spurt, maintenance in adulthood, and decline in older adulthood. Now, research shows that boys and girls that are between the ages of 6 and 7 can increase their strength with resistance training. This resistance training is going to improve their neuromuscular coordination, and it's obviously very important to make sure that we're monitoring our youth that are participating in resistance training. Now, here in this figure that you see here, it has it separated between muscle group and velocity. Now, muscle strength increases with training. When compared to non-training individuals, prepubescent boys achieved larger relative increases in strength over 4 muscle groups and 2 speeds. Now, when it comes to children and them participating in strength training, there have been studies and numerous studies that have been done that have found no damage to children's bones or muscles in training, and it's important to note that there have been no reported injuries either. With resistance training, adolescents and adults can increase muscle mass and muscle strength. Muscle mass can increase over time with proper training, and obviously those who have cardiovascular disease, we're going to want to make sure that we are monitoring them as well. And real quick, just to go back, just on this next slide, there has also been research I found. I feel like I kind of knew this, but it was cool to read about it as well. There's research that has found that children who are active in sports are stronger than those who are not active in sports. It's like I said, it should be common knowledge and something that you should see that, but I think it's important to know and understand you're developing these good habits in children who are involved in sports and getting them active. These young athletes, they're already more physiologically more mature than those who are not participating in sports as well. And for the children who are getting involved in resistance training, the best way to start them in resistance training is to start with light resistance and progress in small increments. All right, now we're going to move on to flexibility. What is flexibility? Flexibility is the ability to move joints through full range of motion and have the benefits of maximal performance. And now, a person who has limited flexibility, they can end up experiencing, or it may end up leading to them being injured and having restricted mobility. People who are involved in flexibility and add flexibility into their everyday lives, they're going to see a increase and they're going to see benefits in their performance of their everyday lives. But if they're involved in sports and dance, they're definitely going to see the performance benefits of it. Now, flexibility assessments, there's 2 that we're going to talk about. And the first one's going to be with the goniometer, which you'll see in the picture here. Now, flexibility is joint specific. Each joint has to be measured, and that's the only way you're going to get an accurate range of motion measurement is by making sure you measure each joint. Now, most measurements are done with goniometers, again, as you see here, as we're all familiar with. And just go in here real quick to explain how you do it. The axis goes over the center of the joint, and you'll see where they position the arms on the leg or the limb, and then they align everything up, and they see where the degrees are between the 2 arms, which will show the range of motion of the joint. Now, the sit and reach. This is one of the most common assessments for flexibility, but it does have disadvantages. The performance of an assessment can be related to exercise and training for strength and range of motion. So somebody who is constantly training and exercising, working on their range of motion, they're obviously going to do better in this assessment than somebody who does not do those things. It's a pretty well-known fact, and I'll go into this more here in just a few minutes, but girls are just more flexible than their male counterpart. It's just part of our genetic makeup, plus it's something that girls tend to, like I said, I'll go into this more in a minute, that girls tend to be involved in more activities where flexibility is a necessity. And flexibility becomes more variable with age, and some lose a significant degree of flexibility. So what are the developmental changes in flexibility? Well, range of motion is possible at any joint, and it depends on the joint's bone structure and soft tissue's resistance to movement. A person can be flexible at one joint and then be completely inflexible or not flexible at all in another. So we'll start with childhood. As we know, infants and toddlers are very flexible. Babies are able to lay on their backs, take their feet, touch their head, and it's no problem. Try doing that as an adult, and you may be a contortionist. But all kidding aside, infants and toddlers are just very flexible. It's just part of their makeup, their tissues. They're able to be that flexible because they're still developing. Now, boys, they start to lose their flexibility after the age of 10, and girls after the age of 12. So they're very close in age. Again, the boys are 10, girls are 12. But it's something that isn't gone forever. They just start to lose. If they don't continue to work on their flexibility, then they're going to lose it. It's something they're going to have to work to get back. Now, people can maintain or improve their flexibility levels, like I was just saying. Now, the boys who are losing it at 10 and the girls who are losing their flexibility at 12, if they continue working on flexibility and doing exercises that incorporate stretching and flexibility, then they're going to be able to maintain what they have and or improve what they are currently at. Again, like I mentioned, girls are more flexible than boys. This comes from stretching exercises that are more socially acceptable for girls, and more girls participate in these specific types of sports, such as gymnastics and dance. The girls just do those things more than boys do. Now, in adulthood, flexibility decreases without training at any point in the lifespan. However, specific training can reverse a loss of flexibility at any age. So if you lose your flexibility and you're just like, I got nothing left in me, I'm not flexible at all, you're not doomed forever. You can start working on training and you can reverse those effects. Those that are in their mid to late 20s will experience maximum range of motion decline. And they'll experience this decline faster in some joints than they do in other joints. Flexibility declines in adulthood, especially in the joints that are rarely used, after 50. Adults who maintain training for flexibility maintain their flexibility levels. So again, if you are flexible, then keep on doing what you're doing because you'll be able to keep your levels. But if you start to lose them, then you can bounce back, but it's easier to keep what you have than have to try and make up for it later. Now, osteoarthritis is a degenerative chronic disease of the joints. Now, osteoarthritis and osteoporosis both contribute to a decrease in flexibility. Now, for flexibility training, those who have full range of motion can maintain their range of motion with continued training. And training can improve range of motion in those with limited range of motion. So again, like I've already been telling you, If you're already flexible, keep doing what you're doing, and you may end up getting even further past where you are now. Or if your flexibility is not so awesome, start getting into flexibility and getting within your range of motion so you can increase what you currently have.
If you're not stretching after a workout, you're missing a key benefit of exercise.
You should include stretching to your normal exercise routine for three main reasons. The first reason is that it can increase your range of motion in your joints.
And orthopedic surgeon Dr. Glenn Schur says stretching can potentially improve athletic performance and dramatically reduce the risk of injury.
Post-workout stretches are very important because your muscles at that time are warm and they're very responsive to stretching.
Dr. Schur says you should hold stretches for around 30 seconds. Keep them gentle and slow and avoid bouncing. And stop if there's pain. Stretches like this one for quads should create a sense of tension and stress across the muscle, but no intense pain.
When you're at a point where it's becoming painful, you can actually cause damage to the muscles as well as the ligaments. Improving your flexibility after the workout can take as little as 5 to 10 minutes. However, it will pay dividends down the road.
For the Mayo Clinic News Network, I'm Jeff Olson.
Okay, and in summary of flexibility, again, just a key reminder that flexibility is the ability to move joints through a full range of motion. Those who have limited flexibility can end up leading themselves to injury and restricted mobility. We can all benefit from flexibility, but those who are involved in sports and dance will see performance benefits of flexibility. Remember, flexibility is joint specific. And adults who maintain their flexibility training can maintain their flexibility levels. They don't lose it if they keep maintaining it. And finally, in summary of this entire thing, is that muscular strength and flexibility are equally important and are related to each other. It's very important to remember they go hand in hand with each other. By incorporating flexibility and strength into a training program, a person can improve these areas of their life across their lifespan from a young child all the way into their older days. And it's important to understand having reasonable levels of strength and flexibility is beneficial for everyone, and it's not just for athletes, for everyone in everyday life.